I'm Jim Collison, and this is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on February 22nd, 2022. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you're listening live, love you have you join us in our chat room on our live page. There's just a link right above me there. Or if you have questions after the fact, maybe you're listening to this on YouTube or as a podcast, you can always send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget, if you're on that podcast app, go ahead and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Same thing there on YouTube. Click subscribe, click the bell. Make sure you never miss an episode. Charlotte Blair is my host today. Charlotte is a Gallup certified and ICF coach, attaining both in 2014, which seems like a long time ago, Charlotte. After transitioning from Verizon, she now runs two successful businesses and partnering with other coaches and learning organizations to deliver great outcomes. Charlotte is a founding partner in the Strengths Partners, as well as a coach and mentor to other global coaches. I'll say your top 5. She's going to want to do all 10 here in a second, but Activator, Woo, Command, Arranger, Positivity. Charlotte, it's always a great day when I get to spend it with you, or at least an hour in this. Welcome to Call to Coach.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to chat with you and share some tips and insights and learnings with the community.
Yeah, we've got some great stuff ahead. And I said you'd say maybe your top 10. Do you want to go through, you want to rattle off all 10 and let folks know who you really are?
Yep. So you shared the top 5. So then I follow with responsibility, communication, maximizer, individualization, and significance. And then just outside there is also self-assurance and futuristic.
We our top 10 are very similar. I think it's 7 or 8 out of 10, and we often joke that you're just me on the other side of the planet, and it's actually really helpful to have you over there. You're a big help in our Facebook groups, filling in for me when I'm sleeping. Ralph, the same way. We kind of cover the globe together for those in Facebook. Thanks for taking all that time. I'll just say that. Thanks for taking the time to help me and others kind of mentor and be a voice in the community and provide those answers. Charlotte, thanks for doing that. I appreciate it.
That's right. I enjoy doing it. That's part of my mission of helping spread this global movement of people discovering their strengths. So if I can help empower other coaches and other strengths enthusiasts, then we get there faster.
Well, I appreciate it. And by the way, not everybody wants to do that. You've been doing it like me a long time. And if you didn't want to do it, you would have quit a long time ago. You can't fake it that long. So I always appreciate the time and the effort that you put in covering the other side of the globe for me. We are doing kind of a series where I'm having experienced coaches come on and kind of talk about lessons learned. We started with Brent O'Bannon, had Maureen Monty on a couple weeks ago, spending some time with you, and I got some other coaches lined up kind of in the series. I want to talk a little bit about some key learnings. You've been coaching a long time. I think you said to me, and I didn't look it up, but you did. You were on Call to Coach back in 2015, and maybe that was season 2 or 3?
Season 3.
Season 3. What did we talk about? What do you remember what the subject was?
It certainly had a strong flavor of understanding the different dynamics. I think I just really started out, I guess, in the coaching, and it was sharing some of the observations that I had with doing some one-on-ones and some teams and that dynamics of, I remember sharing a particular situation where somebody had high responsibility and she felt that she needed to take everything on. But when she looked actually at her developer, she realized that she didn't have to take it all on. She could use her developer to develop somebody else so that she didn't have to. So I think it was a bit of that theme dynamics, my experience with some of those.
Did you, when you started doing this, 2014, right? So 8 years now doing this. Did you think you'd be where you're at today? Did you have any idea? Did you have some hopes and dreams? Did you get there, or did this just kind of happen?
This kind of happened. It's funny, but people, when I worked at Verizon, so I was in sales at Verizon. When I worked there, some people said, have you ever thought about, starting your own business? Or when I first became Gallup accredited, why don't you start your own business? And I'm like, no, I'm a corporate beast. I've always worked for big blue chip organizations. No, I'd never start my business. So no, it is very funny looking back and going, Would I have ever thought that I'd start my own business? No. And whilst we started off in a partnership initially, it's more me sort of operating on my own. There's a few things, like I'm thinking of writing a book this year. In fact, I've committed to writing a book this year. And if you'd asked me the same thing, probably even only 5 years ago, would you write a book? It'd be like, no. So it's very much just kind of happened, but really glad that it's just happened.
Yeah, I think a lot in the community that I work with, a lot of coaches have an idea or a dream, and it begins to morph as you're doing it longer. I never thought I'd be in the role that I'm in, doing the things that I'm doing at the times that I'm doing them. I mean, I just don't, it's not something I ever dreamt about. People are like, oh, you're in your dream job. And I'm like, I never dreamt about this. It just kind of happened. And I think a lot of us kind of fall into that situation, and it's as good or as different as whatever we're looking for in it. Let's talk about, we want to spend some time. You're a great mentor to a lot of coaches now, and a lot of folks look to you for advice or for help or for any of those things. And so what I wanted to do is spend a few minutes kind of talking about, what have you learned in the last 8 years? And you kind of summarize this in your blog post. We'll have that a link to that available in the show notes for those of you who are listening to this as a podcast. But Charlotte, walk us through some of those key learnings. Like, what have you in the last 8 years? What are some things that you've learned?
I feel like I've got to go over the hour on some of those learnings. And I'd like to start by caveating that these are my learnings, obviously, from my filter of the world, through my lens of strengths. And for those of you who don't know, and I often share this one, I'm learner number 34, activator number 1. So I very much learn through the doing. And hey, if I make a stuff up, then my positivity goes, well, never mind, let's move forward, maximize how do we make it better the next time. So I'm going to share some key learnings and then some key tips, I guess, around sales and some key resources. I think for me, the biggest learning is that difference between coaching and giving advice. So I was sort of, I guess, went through the ICF process before I became Gallup accredited. Not that long before. It was very much in conjunction. And I went, I understand the grow model. I understand the principles of coaching now, but I didn't really do a massive amount with it. I think my biggest learnings have actually been in the last couple of years as I've started off in that ICF process. So I was sharing with Jim earlier in the pre-call that, before I went, I'm ICF. I did not have the discipline enough to to track the coaching hours that I'd done and, track people's emails and things. And I went, I'll do that ACC, PCC thing later. And I never quite got around to it. It wasn't until the badges came out and, people were sharing, I'm now a PCC. I was like, high significance. I want one of those badges. So I started the process. My biggest learning has been through that process and, having my own mentor and coach and supervisor to kind of help me through that process. But the big difference around what coaching is versus consulting or mentoring, and coaching's fundamentally asking those powerful questions and having the other person come up with the answer. I would say to people, you know yourself way better than I know you. You know yourself better than any report knows you. My job is to ask you questions and help you sort of make those linkages back to successful moments and how you can apply it. So I think that's the biggest learning for me, going through that whole process and the rigor that's involved.
Charlotte, sometimes I feel like ICF doesn't leave any room for advice or consulting in their framework a little bit. Would you agree or disagree with me? And when's the right place for advice and consulting and coaching?
Well, I think I can see in the chat, there's quite a few people that I have coached / mentored, and I'm quite explicit about the fact that I'm coaching and mentoring in those sessions. Sometimes people do want advice and say, hey, Charlotte, you've done this. We haven't done this. What advice would you give me? And then I put my mentoring hat on. Oh, and before I forget, happy birthday, Bill Dipple, who's one of the people that I coached. It's his birthday today. So happy birthday, Bill. I think, the ICF process, if you are pure coaching somebody, then no, there's not room for advice. And I think that's actually, personally, I think that's a good thing. If, however, you're doing a report debrief, I think that's slightly different because you're maybe dispelling some myths that exist. You're maybe giving advice. I mean, one of the biggest things I have up is that, bar on page 21. Oh my God, I'm no good at, influencing. It's only got this little bit of yellow. And then I may be giving a little bit of advice there, or even still trying to ask questions of which of your other themes might you use to influence. So I agree that, yes, there is it feels like there's not much room, but I think that's for a reason. And it's to be able to define with your client whether you are coaching or whether you are mentoring is important. I've now started, I feel like I'm giving you a tip already, but listening to one of Dean Jones's podcasts, hearing him say, hey, I start my calls now with clients saying, have you had a coach before? And if they say yes, I say, what was your experience of a coach? And then I distinguish the difference between what I would class as coaching and what they might have had as coaching in the past. If they say no, then I might say something like, I'm an ICF coach. I'm bound by ethics and confidentiality. Whatever we talk about today isn't going to go any further. But I would define coaching as asking questions. And as I just sort of shared, you know yourself better than I know you. I'm going to be asking questions. It's not supposed to feel like the Spanish Inquisition, but at first I'm going to be asking questions and, have you sort of connect back. And I might be asking why 3 times because I want to drill deeper to find out what's really important. So yes, it feels like there's no room for advice, but I think you have to distinguish in the agreement up front, are you coaching or are you mentoring? And then maybe at the end say, can I give you some advice?
Yeah. Where would you add consulting in, or just consulting, mentoring, or when you think about consulting, how is that different?
I guess I would define, coaching as asking questions, mentoring as imparting knowledge and experience based on your own experiences. And then consulting, I would see typically, when I consulted for Mercer, I was paid to, give advice or share frameworks or, sort of share learning. So I guess consulting can fit in underneath that, advice giving, mentoring piece, but invariably you're being paid to deliver a piece of work. And that might be, here we are, leadership team, in order to get better at giving feedback, here's a SBI model that you might want to use, and you're being paid to give, advice and resources in there. But yeah, it can fall under the mentoring banner as well, I guess.
I love that. And there's lots of gray in between that. And I don't think you have to get crazy about nailing those down, but I do, to your point, I think it's really important that we understand what kind of this agreement that we're doing, that the expectations, right? What are you trying to get out of this? They can kind of fit into those 3 buckets to say, well, this is kind of what we're doing today. I spend a lot of time consulting in my role. People are asking me questions, they need help. And they're like, what should I do? It's pure consulting, right? I could call that coaching, but that's really more about saying, well, this is what I would do to do this. I had 3 of those calls today, right? I don't spend a ton of time coaching. I spend more time consulting. I think it's just good. It's kind of good to know. Anything else you want to add before we move on to your third learning?
Yeah, I think if I sort of give an example there, what I try to avoid doing, and I'm sure I probably do it sometimes, which is why they're recording your coaching and having that review with your mentor as useful learnings, is I try not to say, oh, Jim, that's because you're high woo. You do this because you're high woo. That to me is that difference between, oh, I'm telling you what your themes are versus, hey, which of your themes do you think are playing out when you're doing that, Jim? And you making the connection. I might say, I'm wondering, I'm hearing a little bit of maybe maximizer, which I can see is just outside your top 10 at number 11. Maybe let's explore what maximizer is a little bit. So it's that piece of, sort of just teasing threads out as opposed to say, oh, well, you do that because of this.
Yeah. And I think it's really important when we've identified that we move on to the aiming part of that, of like, okay, we've identified this now. I think sometimes we can get a little stuck. I've spent enough time with coaches, we can get a little stuck in, because that feels good. You recognize that feels good. But I think eventually, because how much does accountability, so Charlotte, and you think about the coaching you do, what's the role of accountability play in that for your coaching?
Well, being somebody that's high activator, command, responsibility, I kind of do call myself a bit of an accountability coach. And I'm doing some work, with a company at the moment, a big Australian telco. And they have 3 sessions, and there is, clear expectations that or assuming that that's what they also want to get from the session, that they walk away with a development plan and an action plan. So, using my talent themes, I try and make sure that I am holding people accountable to, how are you adding knowledge, skill, and experience to your talents in between sessions, so that you're growing. But then what are you going to do with this? So if it's, yes, I'm going for a job interview, or if it's, I want to be a better leader, whatever they've said up front in the agreement that they want to get from the session. But yeah, that's my, I guess, coming from my lens of my talent themes, I would see myself as a little bit more of an accountability coach, which is why I can get frustrated with people. Oh no, I haven't had time. I haven't done anything. What?
Yeah, no, I like it. I think that's a question coaches should ask themselves is, at what point, how much accountability is going to enter in, or will I provide in the coaching for it? And I think that's just an area of self-awareness. In your notes, you talked about slowing down to be able to speed up. What does that mean?
Yeah. So my learning number 3 is, being a coach high maximizer. There's so much great stuff that Gallup provide us in the trainings and the resources, and I want to give people everything. And I, cram it in. And again, being activator, I think Jan Peters sort of put a question out earlier. Say, hey, Charlotte, how do you curb your activator? I don't always curb my activator. I try my very best, but I want to give people everything. And I think what I've really learned is that we have to slow down in order to be able to speed up. So making sure that people have a really good understanding their own talent themes and the themes of others before we go rushing into activities, looking at the team grid or the best of us. So to be able to slow down and give them time to connect is important. I also still see people say, oh, well, I'm doing a discovery session in 1 hour or 2 hours. And I personally don't think that we can rush these things. We need more time. So really getting clear from the client up front on the expectations are, and we'll kind of come on to that in my top tips. But I guess I've learned over the years to just slow down on things. And I do a bit of a Goldilocks test on that with the people that I'm working with, especially in teams. I kind of go, if everyone's familiar with the old, story Goldilocks and the 3 bears, is it too fast, too slow, just right? I kind of try and get a feel. And if it's virtual, it's a kind of thumbs up type thing. And if it's in the room, I kind of get a gauge in the room, because we've got other people that are activators like me that want to go fast. There's people that are high intellection that want to think about it. The relators want to connect with each other. So I'm trying to make sure I get the balance. But I guess I've learned that less is more, less content is better. Going deeper on that is better than just go, right, I can do this, I could do this, I could do this. I'm going to cram all these things in. But I think being individualization, I might plan to put it in, and I'm flexible enough to take it out if I can sense that we need to go a bit deeper on something.
Yeah, I think I've learned if I've got 90 minutes, I'm going to get to 1 or 2 things. It just doesn't, I think if I try to jam more in there or jam a bunch of PowerPoint slides in, there's just not enough time. And I'd rather them have time talking about themselves and discovering things than, whipping through a PowerPoint presentation. Bill,
that's another topic, PowerPoint.
Okay. We'll bring that up in a second. Bill, the birthday boy, says, biggest challenge, Charlotte, that you've seen in coaching and training in the 8 years, if you were to
Did you say challenge or change? I can see biggest change. Biggest change Charlotte has seen.
Oh, yeah. No, you're right. It is change. Biggest change.
But I could share challenge as well.
No, it's okay. Maybe I need some new glasses.
Biggest change that I've seen in the last 8 years. Well, I think the biggest change has been the appetite to focus on strengths. That's a lovely positive change that I think I'm seeing. The people that are, want to see the strengths movement. I think the next biggest change, which I think ICF have actually been helping, is defining what coaching is, because you could ask 10 different people what they think coaching is, and you're going to get 10 different answers. So I think with the standardization and the competencies, I think it's created more clarity. around coaching, I think in the last 8 years. I mean, it's funny. I'll often share that when I first did my training, the first course I ever went to, ICF, through the Institute of Executive Coaching and Leadership, who I highly recommend anybody who's thinking about starting the ICF process. They had us all line up. You had to line up based on how you would rate yourself and your coaching capability on a scale of 1 to 10 in the room. 1 being, don't know anything about coaching, 10 being, I think I'm an expert. Now, I remember walking and I went, I reckon I'm a 6 or a 7. I think I'm pretty good at giving advice. Little did I know actually what coaching was. Now, I should have put myself really right down at that number 1. So I think there is a better understanding of what coaching is. And I think it's starting to get a better reputation, because people would often see coaching as something that was remedial, as opposed to something that you would benefit from when you're a high performer and you're wanting to move forward.
What do you think the importance of partnership has been for you in this? Maybe not doing it alone, but talk a little bit about your partnership model and what's been helpful.
Yeah. So that's my learnings number 4 around partnering with other people. So obviously the philosophy of the Strengths Partners is that we were partnering with each other. We're partnering with our clients. We're really understanding what our clients' needs are. And anybody that follows the Facebook will see that. I feel like a broken record sometimes when people say, what activity would you do? It's like, well, it depends on what outcome you want. I love partnering with other coaches as well. So there are some coaches who ask me to deliver their work for them. There are some coaches where I can't deliver the work and they deliver the work for me. And we operate on a 80-20 rule. Whoever wins the work gets 20%. Whoever delivers the work gets 80%. I love, another example would be Sarah in China. I had an opportunity where a client wanted a Mandarin speaking coach, but I don't speak Mandarin. And it was lovely having the opportunity to partner with Sarah over that, where she would be an interpreter. I partner with other coaches on programs. We've got Telstra as a client. I'm partnering with Dion on that one, and Jill, where we all sort of deliver different things, but we'll often connect and share our learnings and what we're seeing, and great resources. That's a great opportunity to partner. Masterminds. I'm part of a couple of different masterminds. They're really valuable, not only for the friendship, camaraderie, the sharing, the learnings on that. So there's lots of different ways to partner, but I like the sort of proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I love and really appreciate this community, because there's a lot of partnering and sharing and collaboration that goes on.
It's a good thing you are the Strengths Partners, because I think you give a masterclass every day in partnership. But just watching you from the outside, knowing, we talk pretty often, so I kind of know what's going on in your world. And you just continue to give a clinic. And so I think for others who are thinking about a stronger partnership model, I think Charlotte's a great example of that, and just the way it works and some of the components to it and the nuances. Marta had asked a question. I want to put it on top of this partnership. What surprised you the most about this experience? So in the 8 years, as we think through whether in partnerships or just in coaching, what surprised you the most?
Do you know what? I think if I answer that, what comes to my mind straight away is that actually I could earn some decent money. I didn't go out with the intention of earning money from this. I thought, as long as I could earn enough to feed the kids, that's okay. Being in IT sales, I was paid pretty well. Being in sales, I've always been in sales of some shape or form. And at first I thought, well, it's going to take me a long time to get up and running. And it's going to take me a long time to earn some decent money. And I'm surprised that it happened quicker than it did. Now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't just all sort of walk in the door. You have to feed the funnel and sort of keep things ticking over. And it's the same, it's not that's not my primary driver why I do this. I don't do it to earn money. But yeah, I'm surprised that, yes, you can make a living. And a lot of people do say to me, oh, can you make a living out of this? And it's like, yeah, absolutely you can. You need to put the sort of legwork in. But yes, I think that off the top of my head, my first instant reaction is, yeah, I'm probably surprised that I could earn a decent wage from this.
Yeah. So one more question before we kind of move on to tips. Steve asked, and I'll stack these questions because I got one too. At what point did you decide to be a supporter of strengths coaches? In other words, was there a moment you kind of decided, I'm going to kind of double down on this partnership aspect? I mean, it's been strengths partners, so maybe from the very beginning, but at what point did you decide to do that? And then this is my question, how much of the sales work that you did before influenced that?
So part one of the question, I can't actually remember exactly when it was. I think, was it 2019 Summit Gym where you surprised me and invited me up on stage, which was awesomely exciting.
But 18, 19, one of those.
18, 19. Yeah, I remember sharing there that was my vision, I guess, to help more coaches, because the way to accelerate this movement would be, I can only reach a certain amount of people on my own, but if I can help other coaches, then that ripple effect gets bigger. If I can help, Bill and Renee, reach another 1,000 people than they might not have, met before, great. So I think I had a vision for it, Jim, probably at the summit, and I shared it. I've always been pretty collaborative and open and positive. I think actually the start of COVID is what really accelerated it, where we'd see things pop up online of people saying, hey, how do you run breakout rooms with Zoom? And I'm like, I don't know, but let's learn together. So I'd learn together, and then people would say, how do you do this? And I'm like, I know how to do that. Let me jump on and share. It's a bit like, I said to you, Jim, hey, I'm thinking of starting a podcast. Instead of you and I having it cool, why don't I invite a whole lot of my other friends? I'm high woo. Right. So invite my friends and join that. So I think it, that started. And then I think also after one of the other summits, I had some materials on change, leveraging strengths and change. And somebody said, hey, in fact, somebody on the community said, hey, has anybody got any materials on change? I remember Paul Allen saying, yeah, Charlotte's just did a breakout session in the summit on change. And then somebody would say, oh, can you share that with me? Can you share that with me? And then I got a Me Too list of about 40 people. Whilst I think most people will hopefully see and appreciate, I am very willing and I will give, but there has to reach a point of, well, okay, it's taken me a long time to develop some of those materials. So I'm not just going to give everything for free, but I charge a very sort of nominal amount. I'd like to think, well, I know I charge less for other coaches than I do corporate clients to be able to support and mentor. I for the amount of requests that I get, I could probably, mentor and support other coaches full time, but I do need to, feed my expensive habits of horses and jewelry and stuff like that. And feed the kids.
Allegedly, right? Allegedly feed the kids.
Well, they feed me now. They're grown up.
You actually, when the pandemic first started, you beat me to the punch on supporting the coaches in a way like, let's just do this right now. And just full disclosure, I was really hesitant and resistant to just doing that. I didn't want to jump on Zoom. I did not want those kinds of calls, and you did it. And you kind of taught me back, like, okay, I should probably do a little more of this. It took me a full year. I'm not gonna lie. I'm just being transparent here. It took me a full year to get there, but you taught me that, right? And so I do appreciate what you did. Your partnership for the community, and held a lot. Listen, I created a ton of learning content in 2020. Some of our best work, because we had all these consultants that were available. So I recorded everybody I could get my hands on, right? So if you're new to the community and you haven't gone back to some of the stuff we did in 2020, there's some great learning in that. But Charlotte, thank you for being there for the community in doing that. I
forgot to answer part two.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah. Sales. Sorry. How much did sales influence that? Yeah, it was my question. I didn't really care.
Oh, okay. I think a bit. I think having a sales background obviously helps, but I don't know that I ever intentionally go out trying to sell. I think it's very much, and you think about your own sales style will be influenced through your talent theme. So, being a high woo, I'm very open and love connecting and just meeting people, and then you start the conversation. I'd say sales is a bit like coaching. It's really just fundamentally about asking great questions and understanding the needs in order to see whether you have something that can help versus, hey, have I got it's like opening up the jacket like a used watch salesperson or a fake watch salesperson that says, do you want this one, or this one? CliftonStrengths is, can solve lots of different issues, but what type of solution might they need is going to look different for everybody. So I think sales helps, but you got to find your own way to sell. Did that answer the question, Jim? Was that where you were going with that one?
Yeah, no, I think what I heard you saying, you'd mentioned you were in sales before, and I think what if there was a coach who hadn't done sales to say, well, I've never done sales, so I can't do it. And so I kind of wanted you just to talk through it of like how much of your sales training did influence some of the work that you're doing, because I think, well, and for some coaches, sales is not their gift, and you just need to get help, right? You just need to partner with somebody or find some way to get some things going. If it's not what you're good at, again, that would go against a strengths.
Yeah, well, and I think I guess that leads me on to some of my sales tips.
Yeah, let's dive into those. Why don't we get started? And this one, we've got 8 tips and 8. What are the other 8 resources?
8 sales tips and then 8 process resources. I know, so I'm going to have to speed them up. Right. Jim's already giving me the speed it up, Charlotte.
I know you don't need a niche. Now I'm going to argue with you, but there's not enough time. What does that mean?
And again, I am biased, and this is controversial. I don't believe you do need a niche. I don't niche, whatever you want to call it.
Thing.
Yeah. I don't think you do. I often joke when people say that. I say my niche is humans. My background is IT, but I can honestly, my IT sales, I can tell you how many IT sales teams I've worked with, and that's 0. So I don't think you need a niche. You do need to be clear about what you stand for, though. Don't muddy the water and go, well, today I'm CliftonStrengths and tomorrow I'm Myers-Briggs and next week I'm yoga and something else. So I think first tip is get clear, and you don't have to have a niche, but that's purely my own opinion. I don't have a clear niche. I mean, probably if I ask all those on chat at the moment, what would you say my niche was? I'd probably get a whole, and feel free to post in chat, but you'd probably get a whole load of different things. I'd like to say it's teams and managers, and charlotteblair.com.au is coaching and supporting other coaches, but is that a niche? I'm not sure. Second tip, which is aligned to that leads on to, I see where you were going now, Jim, with your question. You were trying to guide me on to move on. Okay. Just be more explicit. Just tell me, Jim. You need to be visible. So regardless of what platform you're on. So yes, people go, oh, Charlotte, you're always on Facebook. Well, that's where certain people might find me. Or, wow, Charlotte, you post a lot on LinkedIn. I can tell you I've had more leads from LinkedIn than I have from my website or, the Gallup coaching directory. So get clear about where you want your clients to find you, or where your clients are, and whether that's Instagram or your website or Facebook. They need to know where to find you. I remember listening to Brent O'Bannon's session about playing the long game, and you need to be able to be found. You do. Your website does not need to be mega fancy, though. Just have some sort of presence. And if anybody needs somebody around the website and you like mine, I'll give you Christian's details.
Charlotte, before you move to number 3,
I'm trying to speed up and you're telling me to slow down.
I am because this is an important point. Like have some contact information on your website, please. I can't tell you how many people, and I see this in the podcasting space all the time. They have a lot of stuff on their website. I can't find how to contact them. It needs to be very, very clear. So make sure on your website, if they land on the very front page, it needs to be, without moving anywhere, they can find a way to contact you, right? A lot of people put it in the footer, and people just don't make it to the footer. So make sure you're getting out there. Should be very, very visible. All right, number 3.
Number 3, I'm looking to the side because I'm reminding myself where they are. Focus on the outcome, not on the activity. I mentioned this earlier. I sound like a broken record often when people say, hey, what activity would you do for 2 hours? I've got a group of 30. It's like, well, the activity list you could do is huge, but you have to understand what are the outcomes? So, maybe this is some of those sales questions. And on my website under resources, I've got top tips for great outcomes. I recommend that you download that and have a read of that. There's some very simple questions on there. Things like, hey, Mr. Customer, or Mr., if you're internal, and you're wanting to spread this out to a team, how do you want people thinking, feeling, and doing differently as a result of a workshop, for instance? And if they skip on the feeling bit, go back of, hey, what I heard, I heard the doing, but I didn't hear the feeling bit. Ask for things like evidence and impact. If they say, oh, well, we want to break down silos. Well, what's currently going on for you right now? Yeah, well, people are operating in silos. Wow, what's that costing your business right now? Yeah, we're probably losing, 30 man hours a week. Well, gee, what's the average salary? Well, it's this. So, you're hearing that they're losing $200,000 as a result in operating in silos. So all these questions that you're asking, and you're digging a little bit deeper to what's going on, what's happening now, where do you want them to be? Our job is to help them shift the dial and move to where they want to be. That then allows you to, I guess, create something that meets exactly the needs. But you have to really understand the outcomes. What do they want by the end of the session? How do they want people thinking and feeling, doing differently? I mean, yes, you have the standard discovery of, yeah, I get to learn my strengths, but what difference will it make if people have learned their strengths? So I think that key piece on focusing outcomes, and say that top tips on outcomes, I think people will find hopefully useful.
I put the link to that form in the chat room. So if you guys want to click on it, you can take it there. We'll have it in the show notes as well. All right, number 4.
Cool. Number 4 is, once you know the outcomes, then you can tailor your proposal based on those outcomes. You can say to the client, well, this is what we heard you say, and this is what we believe. So, at this point, yes, you are being the consultant of saying, this is your problem. This is how we can solve it for you, or this is what you want to achieve, and this is how we can solve it for you. So, show them that you are the person that can help them by using the language that you heard through the how do you want people thinking, feeling, and, pop a page on your proposal of this is what we heard, because that makes them feel special that you listened.
You model this every day on the Facebook groups. People will come in and say, hey, I've got this situation and what should I do? And a lot of people give advice. And then you say, what do they need? Basically, like, what are they looking for? Did you ask some questions to know, like, what are the outcomes that you're looking for? And you consistently say that. Thank you for saying it. It sounds much better coming from you than it does from me for whatever reason. So I appreciate that. But you live that every single day. So thanks for keep asking that such important question. What are they driving towards? Like, what are their needs? Yeah. Where do they want to land? So great. Number 5.
Yeah. Number 5 is, don't be afraid to push back. So I think when I first started, people would say, hey, Charlotte, can you come in and do a 1-hour session? And I would hear them say, yeah, we want people to understand their strengths better and, break down silos and reduce conflict or whatever it be. And I'm like, oh, gee, all right. I don't think we could do that in an hour. But I didn't push back. And then I don't want people to walk away with a bad experience. I don't want people to walk away and go, oh, do you remember that strengths thing we did, 6 months ago? Yeah, I can't remember what it is or what we did. I want people to have a great experience. And if I think it needs longer than an hour to do that, which it does, I'll push back and say, I don't think we're going to be able to achieve those outcomes in that time. I think we really need a minimum of half a day. And if that's going to be virtual now, break it down into, 2.5 hours. But if you're the consultant, you're the expert in strengths, which, most of you are, all of you are, you need to kind of push back a little bit on that one. Or reset their expectations and say, well, look, that's a big ask. I don't think we're going to be able to do it, but let's at least start the journey. What we can cover is X, Y, Z, or which of these that you've said are really important that we achieve is the most important. Let's at least say, right, we're going to have people getting comfortable with being able to name, claim their talent theme. So don't be afraid to push back.
What advice would you give to a new coach? Because this is the hardest thing to do when you first start doing this, and you feel like if I push back, I'm going to get fired, or they're not going to choose me, or whatever. What kind of advice would you give to the new coach?
And again, this is coming from my lens of talent themes, and there's probably a little bit of self-assurance and command in here. But I guess I would tell them to go with your gut, go with what you think is right. And if you think you cannot achieve those outcomes in that time, but you're not comfortable to push back, you've got to go with that. But if you know in your heart it's not going to achieve the outcomes, would you rather push back and be explicit, or do you rather they walk away with a, oh, okay, well, we did a strength thing, but as I say, this is so clouded by and biased with my own talent themes. Other people may well go, yeah, look, I can do a really great session in an hour. But I think it's more of a challenge. Or I'm very explicit about saying we are only scratching the surface.
Yeah.
There's a lot more that we can do.
I love that you come at that from your own set of talent themes, because I think we all approach that same pushback. I think folks need to figure out what happens when they push back and what's going to be my response. There's going to be a couple no's in every conversation. How am I going to respond to those no's based on how I'm built?
And I've had the no's, and I'm comfortable that I've had the no's. I know that there are things that I have not won and that they've gone with somebody else, and it may well be another coach that I know, and I am very comfortable with that as well. I would rather be known for the person that delivered a great outcome. I'm not saying the other person didn't deliver a great outcome, but I'm comfortable that if they said no, it aligned, I guess, with my values and principles of what I believe to be kind of right. But there are not many that where I've said no or pushed back and they've not gone. They've gone, actually, Charlotte, we appreciate that honesty. You're the expert in doing what you do. Yeah, okay. We're going to do, can we do 2 hours now and 2 hours in 2 weeks' time? Yes. I think there's something else in there that anybody that's, coaches and mentoring with me, I kind of share my pricing that I'm the same whether you have me for a day or 2 hours. So you're going to pay the same for a day. You might as well use me for a day. And if you want to break that up as 2 hours, that's fine. But I don't cost it out of, okay, well, 2 hours is only going to cost you this, but a day is going to cost you this. You're going to pay the day regardless. And that will often rule some people in or out anyway.
Yeah. It's a great way of doing it. And I think, fear of failure and imposter syndrome are real. And this is where those two things creep in. And so this is an area, coaches, where I think having a coach who can help you in this sales process is very, very helpful. Having a sales coach or someone who can walk alongside you, especially if you're new to it or trying to figure these kinds of things out. This is hard. It's why I like being an influencer and not a salesperson, because I'm not a very good salesperson, but I'm a pretty good influencer. If you want to spend some time covering the differences on that, we can talk about that later. Okay, number 6.
Number 6 is add value. I like this one. I get a lot of people say to me, oh, Charlotte, yeah, but if I give them all my resources, they might not need me. And I say they will always need you. But so look at adding value. And if that value is leaving them with a packet of picture cards at the end of a workshop and a list of questions, and on my website as well, under resources, I've made my list of 30 different questions you can use with picture cards free for 24 hours. Otherwise, it's a downloadable resource. But so add value, leave them with a pack of picture cards, suggest that they buy their own version of Cascade, especially if they are a strengths-based organization. You've got more than a little tiny team. Help them, give them Cascade already pre-loaded, or get them to buy it and then help them preload it. Suggest that they go on and buy the CliftonStrengths teams activity resource guide. Give them, and I'll come on some of the resources, but give them things like the manager resource guide. Give them as many things as they need based on their outcomes that will enable them to keep the journey going and keep things alive. It feels counterintuitive to say, oh, I'm going to give them more than they need. I mean, yes, you need to kind of cost it in, but I'm going to give them more. They won't say we don't need you anymore. Or if they do, isn't that a really great thing for them to go, oh, wow, Charlotte, actually, yeah, we're going to go and accredit 6 of our team to go and become Gallup accredited. That's a great thing to be able to go, hey, I planted that little seed, or I lit that little spark, and they've gone off and done it. They will still need you. Like, I've got organizations that I work with 5 years later that still bring me in, even though they've got their own accredited coaches internally, even though they've got a lot of the resources, because They see me as the value add. They see me as the expert, the external person that can help them. But there's a lot of people that push back and say, surely if I give them everything, they won't need me. I personally never experienced that.
Yeah, being the outsider in that situation can be helpful, and you can still continue to be a coach of coaches to those organizations. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of organizations, Jim, that use Gallup. You know, they send people away on their training. There's a big white's good supplier here in Australia. I don't know, they've got 7 or 8 of their own internally accredited coaches that use Gallup for their training for managers, yet they still bring me in because I'm an external viewpoint. I'm somebody that can help. I live and breathe this every day versus, you know, it's part of my, you know, side HR job, for instance. So I can be helpful there.
Let's do number 7.
Number 7, ask for referrals. So I always try and make sure that I ask for referrals. And I can't remember who it was. I think it was Katie. Somebody on the Facebook group said, you know, how if you're new into sales, might you get in front of decision makers, or what advice would you give to new people in sales? Ask for referrals. People typically love helping others. And in my blog, I put a little, at first I was going, 99% of them. I went, actually, that's not backed by any hardcore evidence. And then I found some study that said people like helping people. If I said to you, hey, would you help me out by giving me a referral? I would like to think that if I'd done a good job, most of you would say yes. And in fact, on my charlotteblair.com.au website, a lot of the coaches that I do work with, I've asked for referrals. You know, Bill and Renee and lots of other coaches that I have helped have given me lovely referrals. You don't ask, you don't get. But I think if you ask for referrals or ask for connections, then that's super useful as well. So if it's, well, I'm not the decision maker, who do you think I should be speaking to that might be a decision maker? Or if you've just done a workshop with the finance team, is there anybody else in another department that you think might benefit from the work that we've done today? So yeah, just ask, whether it's your woo or your relator or your developer, whichever talent theme you're going to lean into. Don't hesitate to ask for a referral.
How do you phrase that when you're in that ask? Just because this scares a lot of people to death. So if you could give them even a line they could repeat, what's been successful for you?
That feels like it needs to be a coaching conversation of what is it about that scares you? I feel like we need to go deeper on that one, but we're not going to do a group coaching session here. What's the line that I would use? It tends to just fall out my mouth at the time. What's the line that I would use? Maybe I would start with something like, how was that session? Oh, it was really great. What was your key takeaway? Well, I really got to learn so much about my colleagues. Well, if you found that useful, is there somebody else in your company that you think would benefit? And I'd love to be able to speak to them. Oh, yeah, I think you should speak with Jim. Would you mind sharing Jim's contact details with me? Yeah, no problem. Again, what's the worst they're going to say? The worst they're going to say is no. Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Yeah. Good. I think it's good to have a practice line that you say a lot, so that you feel comfortable in it and you get comfortable saying it. Because if you get in there and you feel uncomfortable, other people sense it, and then you make them uncomfortable. So this is one of the things I've learned about podcasting is I have some lines that I've just memorized and I just repeat them, and they sound really comfortable. So practice I think in this case, practice your ask. And I think it's really, really important. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I would. I think, what I often say in my head, and maybe a question that I might ask in coaching, is what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
So, if you think worst case scenario, and often it depends whether you're talking to somebody high deliberative or positivity, but, even deliberative, analytical people that go, oh my God, I'm really worried about doing this, or I'm really worried about speaking in front of 100 people. Well, what's the worst that can happen? If you think about worst case scenario, and then you say, how realistic is that to happen? Maybe using your analytical, then you get a different, sort of answer. Or how often has that happened in the past? And it's like, well, once. Okay, well, what is the opposite to that of true? How often have people, you've asked somebody and they've said yes? Oh, well, 10 or 15 times. So, okay, so 10 or 15 times somebody said yes, but once somebody said no. What are you thinking now?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's still hard. Like this is, I think it's, no matter how you slice it, this ask is hard. and it's a hard sales. There's some people naturally better at it than others, but I think it just requires a little bit of thought and practice to get it done. Okay, number 8.
Last of the sales tips. And this was a question of somebody. If you're trying to get in front of a decision maker, so somebody said to me, yeah, what advice would you give for somebody that's trying to get in front of a decision maker? I think the number one tool or tip that I found is give them the experience, give them a complimentary code to take the assessment. I recommend the full 34 and even maybe full 34 and manager code. Give it to them, let them experience it, offer them a debrief, because often it will speak for itself. Instead of trying to create a one-pager or a proposal or a pitch, if there is somebody that's key, let them experience it, and then, as I say, it will speak for itself. If it's cost you $100 to do that, but you might be winning $5,000 worth of business, it's worth doing. I think every time that I've done that, the people that were maybe sitting on the fence before or not sure have decided to go ahead. Now, they might have not have decided there and then to go ahead, but invariably they have come back. I don't know that I've ever been in a situation where I've given somebody a code and nothing's ever happened of it. But I guess that's my sort of top tip of, if you can't have a meeting with that decision maker and talk to them, or even if you do and they're still not convinced, let them experience the process.
Going to ask the chat room for some questions here, kind of on the way out. So if you've got some questions we haven't answered yet, drop them in there. How important is the in our 5 steps of building a strengths-based culture, getting executive leadership buy-in is super important. From your experience, how has that helped you, or have you found that to be the truth as well in some of the work that you've done?
In some of the work that I've done. So I've got, I guess, 2 examples of that. I work with a Australian-based superannuation organization. They work primarily supplying superannuation to schools. That started with the CEO, a big advocate, a real fan, high woo, positivity, maximizer, individualization, some of those ones that you kind of typically see, grab it and run with it. So that started from the top. We did a 3-day with the leadership team, and then each of the team members, went through a day's workshop, and we've, been in and done other things with them. In fact, there's a couple of coaches on here that supported me with a workshop with that last year, and I was like, oh my God, this has now gone virtual. I think I need some backup and technical support. Lisa Feldman, I think, being one of those. Now, that started at the top. There's other organizations that I work with, like I work with big government body here in Australia, and we probably work with 500 people within the organization. That started down the bottom. That actually started with a in the middle, maybe. It started with the leadership team. They then cascaded it down to their team. It then jumped across to another team. They cascaded it down. It's jumped across. We've also done sort of half the executive team. So that's been very much fires burning internally, and it's kind of still going. So I've actually seen both, and I wouldn't say that either. In my experience, I wouldn't say that either are, one's more ahead than the other one, quite honestly. I've seen both be successful.
Yeah, I think it's important, but I do appreciate, that it comes in at all levels, right? And sometimes you work with the things you've been given. I told you I may do this to you. You've got 8 more tips on product, and we're just not going to have enough time. I want to ask you, if we could do, we started this new series. We did one of them, and I want to do another one called How I Prepare for It. And I'm kind of wondering if we can take your tips and move them into that session, along with some other coaches who may have some resources that they want to share. Would you?
Sure.
Would you be okay with that? This is live.
Flexible.
We didn't plan this.
No.
We didn't plan this. I told her, I said, you got a lot to cover here. I don't know if we're going to get through it all. I said, well, Dean, he gives me a long list, and it's always like, well, Dean, we'll have to do a part 2 to this.
Yeah.
And so,
no,
Charlotte,
I'm very happy. I feel like I sort of that one of that whole tips at the front, slow down to go faster. Don't try and give them too much. I'm trying to give the community lots, which is why I put it in a blog post as well. But yeah, I'm very happy to move wherever you want to move it to.
That content would lie nicely in that, and we can maybe get a couple other coaches that want to share some resources that they use to get that done.
Sure.
Let's cover a couple questions from the chat room. Steve had asked, is there a group you prefer not to work with?
I think my positivity woo. I don't know. I don't think there's a team I wouldn't want to work with.
You don't have to use the name.
Well, when you say team, I don't think there's an industry I wouldn't want to work with. Possibly gambling. Like I often go, if there was a gambling organization that asked me, I think I might be torn between my values on that one. Is there a group I prefer not to work with? There's certainly no functions. Probably comes back to that niche piece. Humans are humans. It's not like I'd go, well, I'm never going to work with a finance team. So no, okay. My preference is always face to face. Like I sort of virtual, I don't mind, but my preference is face to face. So I guess the worst group scenario would be a group of people who did not contribute, that didn't have their cameras on, that didn't want to be there. That would probably be my worst case scenario.
Okay. Dan asked, and I'm going to change this question a little bit though. He says, share the most awkward engagement you've had at a company. Don't share that. I want to ask, how do you recover from an awkward engagement? Because we all have them, right? We all have these moments and you're like, oh, so maybe any tips for coaches on how to slowly back out of the awkward engagement?
Gosh, I'm pretty good at awkward. I often say to people, I'm not afraid of public speaking, because if there's something embarrassing to do, I've already actually done it, whether it be my flies undone or my skirt tucked in or trip down the stage. I've already done it. So it's like, most awkward, and how did you recover from it? I did put a slide up once actually with a company that I work with that was all about road safety. And I put the Gallup slide up about, do you pick somebody to race while driving? No. Do you pick somebody to race while driving? And that was a big faux pas. Of course, nobody stood up or put their hand up. And they went, well, of course we wouldn't. We're all about road safety. And I was just like, that's a big faux pas. And I just sort of went, oh my God, you're right. And I remember next time I work with that organization to remove that one. I think that's probably the worst one that I've had.
Oh, good. Well, then you haven't had, it hasn't been too bad. So Charlotte, because you have high activator, I think you said jump in and start. Could you elaborate on that? How much preparation versus just going for it to line up business?
To line up business. I think to line up business, fundamentally, it's about relational. So I think where I first started on some of that was going along to some networking type events. So as part of the ICF, I think I would go to alumni evenings and I would get talking. And what do you do? I run Clifton's, I'm focused on strengths and developing strengths-based teams. Tell me a bit more about that. So that networking piece is probably where it first starts. My first ever workshop that I ran, the client didn't know it was my first ever workshop, and they didn't need to know. I think I align a little bit to Amy Cuddy's, fake it till you make it piece on that one. It works for me. Whether it's going to work for other people, I'm not sure. When it comes to the jump in and do it, I think when it comes to a workshop, if you've understood what the client really wants to achieve in that workshop, you start somewhere. You start with a plan. So I always have a kind of flow and an agenda of, this is roughly what I think I'm going to cover. This is roughly how long I think it's going to take me. And then with my individualization and arranger and maximizer, I bend and flex depending on what's coming up in the room. So the activator jumps in and gives it a go, but you always have to kind of move. And I guess what I would add to that, Jim, is that I guess when I first became ICF accredited, I also did an advanced diploma in facilitation, which gave me some really good core grounding skills around facilitation. And that's some of the stuff that I kind of lean upon as well. And I'll stick on my Facebook page as well. A link to that for anybody that's interested. But yeah, I very much operate in the jump in and try it. And if it doesn't work, we shift as we go.
I agree. Okay, last question, super important. They've been wondering if the dog is real and what is the pup's name.
Luke.
Well,
yep.
I think
he's real.
Judy said he is alive because they saw his leg move.
He's the topic of conversation in most of my coaching calls or my team workshops. But what happens is this is my office. My office used to be in the room next door. So some of you probably saw the same weird ceiling, but from the other direction. I used to share the office with my husband. We would compete for airspace, and the dogs were in us together. Now what happens is every now and again, the door just opens and 2 dogs and a cat come bursting in. He's an old dog. Luke's old. He's 12. He just sleeps there all day. He loves it. But it's so funny. Like I've run workshops before, and people have gone, "Is that dog actually alive?" Because he hasn't moved, but he is alive.
It's a good topic of conversation. That's good to know. The chat was very worried about your dog for a while. Like, is that a pillow? At one point, they thought it was a pillow. Well, lots more questions that are out there we can't cover. But Charlotte, thanks for taking the time today. We'll do that. How I prepare for it. So look for that in our Facebook group, and otherwise we'll get that planned here in the next week or 2 or 3. Those are kind of designed to go fast. So we'll get Charlotte in here pretty quick and spend some more time on Zoom.
He'll coach me to go faster this time than today.
No, it's fine. It's all been great. But Charlotte, thanks for doing this. I appreciate you being here.
Can I point people to my, I guess if they want to know more, you can either go and visit charlotteblair.com.au, or please follow me on Facebook. I do have 2 Facebook profiles. One's more of a kind of business coaching profile. The other one's personal.
I never know which one to use.
No, I know.
I'll just use this one.
You'll get me on both, but please connect with me on Facebook, LinkedIn. But yeah, visit charlotteblair.com. There's quite a few different resources on there, a few games, a couple of activities. Go in, download them. Everything's free at the moment for 24 hours. If you're interested in getting some mentoring, coaching, there's a schedule a call, find out more, learn from other coaches that work with me, what it's like to work with me. I'm not for everybody. I often say I'm like Marmite. You'll either love me or you hate me. So, and I don't mind.
I kind of like you, so they should work with you. This is instructions from Mark, who's doing the editing in the future. Mark, make sure Charlotte's website gets put at the top of the post. So while you're typing this, just get it in the top. Thanks for doing that. Well, with that, we'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we do have available on Gallup Access. That would have been one of the tips, by the way, coming on how I prepare for it. Coming up, gallup.com/CliftonStrengths for coaching, master coaching, or if you want to become a Gallup certified strengths coach, just like Charlotte is, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. We'll get the right person in the right region to get back to you on that as well. If you want to follow these live sessions, head out to gallup.eventbrite.com. That would be if you want to know when the how I prepare for it is going to be. You want to follow us out there. Again, gallup.eventbrite.com, and I'll post it out there. Follow us on any social platform by searching Clifton Strengths, and make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. You can subscribe both on your podcast app or there in YouTube. Click that subscribe button, click the bell so you make sure you never miss an episode. I want to thank you for joining us today. If you're listening live, stay around for a smidgen of post show. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.